The Whisper Exotic mission is back. Gameplay-wise, there are new secrets to loot and unlock, but the story of this mysterious cavern has intrigued many. Guardians love to shove gods into weapons, and this is another great example. After Zol's defeat on Mars, he would continue to live on through the very weapon you now hold in your hands. Today we talk about some lore from the Whisper mission and the secrets hidden within this location. Zol, Will of the Thousands, was one of the worm gods in the depths of Fundament that the Hive sisters came across. They took the worms and became the Hive. We now know this was at the hand of the Witness and his disciples like Ralk, but the worm gods nonetheless were pretty powerful creatures. The worms would often assist the sisters and also tried to scheme against them. Zol did this with Oryx a couple of times. Eventually, Oryx's son Nokris was cast away from his kingdom as he was seen as too weak. His own father despised him. So wanting to prove himself, Nokris sought out the worms, and the one who assisted him was Zol, the weakest worm. Together, we have called life to Fundament, and made that life thrive, protected it from extinction. They are our hosts, and we are their strength. But we do not give, we take. For this is the struggle to exist. We are not immune. The weakest of us might give way to the stronger. And Zol felt fear cunning, for it knew that Yol would in time turn its teeth to Zol. But Akka was not the only one with a secret. Zol had a pact with a forgotten child, abandoned by its father. The Cursed One took a fraction of Zol's power, and in return, Zol took the heart from the child, whose name had been struck from the world's grave. The orphan called life out of death and fed that power to Zol. Together, they would find a new world to rule, and the five became three. I, the child, become Herald Death, record these words. They are not of the sorrow, they are mine. Zol and Nokris formed this pact, the weakest worm and the outcast child. Leaving the worms and the Hive behind, they set out for their own planet during the collapse, which was Mars. Hear me, O dreadful worm. We will raise an army. We will die and be reborn in your name, feed you the souls of our enemies. State your claim. We take Mars. On Mars during the collapse, the two came into contact with the Warmind Rasputin and were eventually frozen for years until the events of the Warmind expansion in Destiny 2. The polar caps began to melt, Nokris and Zol awoke and would attack the facilities once more.
Thank the light.
Zol is heading directly for the Clovis Spray facility and Rasputin. If Rasputin dies, the Javelin goes with him. Zol wins.
Very well. And my reservations about the Warmind aren't as important as defeating Zol. We do this together. What do you say, Guardian?
We say it's about time.
In a strike, Zol was defeated for good after encountered a couple of times during the missions. Zol was a worm god, but like the lore mentions, not the strongest, and it kind of shows given we defeated him in a strike. Zol, Will of the Thousands, perished but was not destroyed. Death is a road, death is metamorphosis. The unsacred union between destroyer and destroyed. The might which defeats a god is also the ambrosia that God craves, the meat-sweet logic of existence asserted by violence. the binomial decision between two ways of being which deny each other. In dying, Zol fed richly. So this is the Whisper of the Worm lore card, and as it continues, it explains what happened to Zol after his death on Mars. Now came Zol unto the Taken upon Io, who fed Zol with plunder and tried to make of it an idol and commanding will. Yet Zol was bound joyously to the very logic that sustained it in its death. It wanted the sword proof, the single proof. It wanted to become a rule which divided the mighty living from the mighty dead. So it whispered the anthem anatheme, the temptation to dominate the objective universe with the subjective will. It said, I shall be an engine to make your desire hegemon over your conditions. It said, wield me and use me to test your foe. This was its worship, Ayat. A guardian's power makes a rich feeding ground. Do not be revolted. There are parasites that may benefit the host, teeth sharper than your own. Zol, like other entities in the Destiny universe, like Riven, was able to live on through this death. His essence contained in the very sniper you now hold, seeking to be fed, seeking that sword logic. After his death on Mars, he sent a message to these Taken on Io, and when the Guardian ventured to the moon, traversed the chasms and defeated its champions, the weapon was now ours. So that's the overall story of Zol and the weapon itself, but the location for the Whisper mission was very secretive and mysterious when it came out. Io was used for the Red War, certain missions, and had a Warmind bunker of its own, but one day that random portal would pop up leading us into this giant cavern where we would discover these secrets. Along the way we would encounter jumping puzzles, the very Taken Zol called out to, a mysterious portal showing us the Vault of Glass, and now in the reprised version, something new. And in the end, some very interesting champion Taken enemies. Ta'ark, like Valis Ta'ark, aspect of war, Drevis, Wolf Baroness, aspect of darkness, and Urzak, aspect of hate. We've encountered these enemies before, and this was their Taken form. In the reprised version, after defeating those champions, you then face the final boss in Tolgor, aspect of Agony, a giant Taken ogre. The demiurge of the Hive is the Worm. The demiurge of the Vex is the Thought. The demiurge of the Fallen is the Ether, which is survival. The demiurge of the Cabal is authority. These are the things, both constraint and power, which define the universe of possible actions. These are the rule makers and instruments which enforce reality. Give a power to a guardian, and they shall know that power as a weapon. For when a guardian chooses to alter the world, they do so with the bullet and the blade. Grant a guardian godly power, and that guardian shall fashion it into a perfect rifle. The demiurge of a guardian is the gun. But we must remember that the demiurge is not the god. It is only the thing that converts perfect divine will into imperfect material form. We may wield the demiurge, but if we do, what god wields us? Ulan Tan. For the reprised version of this mission, Eris Morn guides us through these journeys. She speaks to you at the beginning when you pick up the quest, and then each week when you go back for the Whisper's intrinsic perks. Eris Morn turns to face you, the Ahamkara bone in her palm glowing faintly. Even through her blindfold, Eris's gaze is piercing. "Guardian," she begins, "it is my understanding that you're sharpening yourself against the forces of the Witness, making ready for a final reckoning. My brief time as a hive god made it clear to me that some preparations can be made without, others must be made within," she says. "I have a proposal to do both," she says. "If you are willing to delve into a troublesome memory, I can use your forgotten recollections to reassemble a great weapon from your past. And in facing the darkness," she concludes, "you may find even more power than you imagined." So Eris wants to equip us with this new weapon. Now she says recollections from the past, so I'm not sure canonically if we're going back to Io as, it was taken by the Witness, or if she's just pulling from these memories to craft the weapon. But regardless, after we go in, play it, and come back to where she gives us the Whisper of the Worm. Eris grasps your hands and mutters under her breath. You feel lightheaded as her incantation takes hold. After a moment, an enigmatic smile plays over her face. "Yes," she mutters, "I can see it. I can feel it. I can hear it. The whispers. I had almost forgotten myself." She drops your hands and disappears from view. She returns a moment later and gives you a hauntingly familiar weapon. "Wield this," she commands you. "Use it to test your foe. Let this be your worship." She turns from you, looking out over the barren moonscape. Ayat. So that's pretty cool. One, a nod back to the lore card we read from the Whisper of the Worm, and two, she gives you this brand new whisper that's even more powerful. Now after this, if you decide to go back to Eris and back into the mission, you can get different intrinsic perks, and she has some other dialogue like this, where she talks about darkness and memory, and how they bind us together. I'll leave them up on screen for a couple of seconds so you can pause and read if you like, so here you go. Eris gives you a smile of acknowledgement as you approach. "I hear that Shaxx has you on the front lines again," she says, wielding weapons of ill repute no less. "The unofficial Iron Lord was never a master of subtlety. I would lend my expertise," she continues, "but my transformation to and from Hive Godhood took a greater toll than even I anticipated, and regrettably, my body no longer recovers as quickly as it once did." You detect a note of persistent weariness in the former hunter's voice. "In the absence of a ghost, I must make do with tea and silence. Let me then serve as a reminder, Guardian. Every creature has limits. For the lightless, they are hard and uncompromising. I suggest you visit a few more of us mere mortals, Devrim and Hawthorne for instance. I'm sure your strength will raise their spirits, as it has mine." But Guardians, that's basically all we got for this Whisper story and lore. As mentioned, there's a bunch of secrets within the mission, even the reprised version. Most interesting to me, the portal whose image has changed. If you run through it, come back, it's no longer the Vault of Glass, it's someplace else. If you'd like to see some more Destiny lore and mysteries just like this video, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. I thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.